Welcome to Innovation and Leadership. I'm Jess Larson. This is part 2 of our interview with Daniel Harmon.
Depend more on the type of product or the type of brand that they're trying to promote, because you have to find partnerships that work. You can't just go do it because, everybody's going to be doing this and this is the next thing. You need to be intentional about it. I have a good friend, Ricky Ray Butler. He's the CEO of Branded Entertainment Network.
If you missed part 1, go back, listen to all these great campaigns that, people are investing hundreds of thousands and getting millions in sales from. And that's actually what I want to talk about is, our consulting firm, Mylan, we have ad agencies that are clients. I'm interested in the space. In general, I read the books. I like it. We obviously do media production as a media company ourselves. Mm-hmm. And we do not see it very common that an ad agency... I shouldn't say very common. I don't know anybody else that holds themselves to the standard of, we're going to do marketing and it's going to make you a lot of money. Uh-huh. And like that level of metric. And you guys are obviously creative. You're, with hundreds of millions of views of these campaigns. It's obviously funny. It's obviously creative. Can you talk about what you think the rest of the advertising world is missing, or what it is specifically that you say is different about your approach that you are getting these sales for your customers?
So I think it is very much the focus on being able to drive that top line revenue for them. And I think our mentality from that comes a lot from the fact that all of us as founders here have been entrepreneurs at one time or another. In most cases, kind of serial entrepreneurs leading up to this point. And so we kind of know where the business kind of lives and dies to begin with. And so we feel like we're going to be really disingenuous to ourselves and to other people if we're not offering some sort of a service that is ultimately giving them a return on investment, giving them a lift in sales. I mean, if you ask me my definition of advertising, it's 3 words: media that sells. And that's it. Ultimately, you could say, but what about all this like PR stuff or all these things? I'm using it for awareness or for positive
brand affinity.
Yeah, whatever it might be, or engagement. At the end of the day, who cares if your sales don't go up? Like, what's the point of creating any kind of a media asset or communicating with your customers in any kind of a way if the sales aren't the ultimate goal of that, right? And I know that sounds like it's cutthroat, but I don't think it is. At the end of the day, I think you can still be very true to customers and be very serving of them at the same time as you still have that ultimate goal. You got to drive the business with the sales.
Well, it sounds like the very first thing you're doing different is you are measuring yourself that way.
Yes.
You are upfront stating the mountain we are climbing is media that sells, not media that makes people feel good or media that builds a relationship with the customer. It's media that sells. Is that fair?
Yes. I mean, obviously the branding comes along for the ride. That's a huge portion of it for us. We're very big on branding. We always say, even though we're going to create, a really nice, direct response campaign, it's also going to be branded at the same time. So if we're, just to use Squatty Potty as an example again, for those people who don't click through onto the website and either buy or go to Amazon and buy, that at least the unicorn and the prince sticks in their head, so that when they're walking through Target or Costco or wherever they might be, and they see the Squatty Potty there, then that recognition is there.
We ended up watching the Fiberfix video so many times at my house because my wife thought it was funny. And she watched it so many times that's what every of the brothers and brother-in-laws in our family got in their Christmas stocking was they all got Fiberfix. Okay?
It's awesome. It's a great product.
What's funny is you're actually doing the service that it's funny enough that when somebody else would come over, she'd be like, hey, you got to watch this commercial. Come here, come watch this. This is so funny. Right?
Yes.
And she almost gets like social credibility by sharing it because it's that funny, right?
Yeah.
And then in the midst of all that humor, you're like you legitimately show the unfair advantage of this over duct tape, right? And it's and that stuck with her to the point that she took the time to go find it and get it sent to people and ordered to the right houses. And, do you know what I mean?
That's awesome.
Well,
that's the idea.
It's funny. I feel like I'm answering my own question, but this idea of kind of like we get what we measure.
Yes.
Right? And it sounds like you're holding yourself to that measurement.
Very much so. Whenever we get into a partnership with a client, we try to align all our incentives in the contract, the agreement, with theirs, and being able to deliver on that bottom line and have a return on investment. So, such was the case with Camp Chef when they approached us. It's a company. It's a company out of Logan, Utah, and they make this really great grill called the Woodwind. And at the time, actually, we were in talks with Traeger, who makes another grill like this, the pellet grill. But when we actually did tests with them side by side and stuff, we felt like the Woodwind actually had the superior technology and everything. And so it's something we really believed in. But at the end of the day, we needed to be able to drive sales. And so when we approach ads, it's very much from the standpoint of what sold me on something, right? That's where I start. As I think the best insights come as a marketer when you can think like a customer. And when you have that insight of like what sold me on this product first, then you can write to that and you can create to that very specifically and very intentionally. And I mean, it was released, I can't remember, a little over a year ago now, but I mean, it's driven millions in sales for them for the Woodwind. It is a fantastic product. It's the Grill God, which I don't know if you've seen that ad, but if you search Camp Chef Woodwind on Facebook or on YouTube, you'll find it there. But yeah, it's very much setting that expectation with the client that this is how we're going to approach it. We're going to build a long-term brand with you, but at the end of the day, this campaign has to be able to drive sales, and we have a track record. We have a formula for going about doing that.
Yeah. When you think about somebody like us, a media company, we're trying to provide access to business thinkers and folks who maybe the general population doesn't necessarily get to hear this level of thinking from someone, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the service we hope we're providing is access to somebody who actually did it. Instead of just hearing about it or reading an article of somebody else's interpretation from it, it's straight from the horse's mouth. Here's what actually happened. Yeah. Here's what I actually think you should do if you're trying to follow what I did. Lessons, right?
Yeah.
For somebody like us, as you think about the future of media, you read books about the media business and the entertainment business. Uh-huh. As you think about the future of media and you think about somebody like us, there's obviously 500,000 other podcasts out there. We're trying to get into TV right now. And there's no shortage of video content out there.
Yep.
What advice do you have for somebody like us who is trying to deliver on a customer promise? Or what advice would you have for us in general, knowing what you know about media?
Sure. Finding something you're really passionate about, your niche, is really important. What you guys are obviously doing, and then it's all about, I think, picking the platform that makes the most sense for your audience. And for your audience, I'd say if you're not for people out there in general that are wanting to do this, Facebook Watch right now is kind of an exploding platform. It kind of feels like the early days of YouTube right now with Facebook Watch for people that are getting in on it. Because essentially what Facebook has decided is that any kind of video content that's not created on its system, it's going to basically algorithmically push out of your newsfeed, right? They're not going to show it to you if you're sharing a YouTube link or if you're sharing a Vimeo link or something like that. They're not going to show it to you in a dynamic way, like with the autoplay and the big prime real estate. And so with Facebook Watch, they're actually algorithmically favoring that a lot. So I mean, just a case in point, a dry bar comedy. Harmon Brothers has done. Oh, sorry, you were going to.
Well, for people who don't know, largest collection. So you're co-founder of VidAngel.
Yes,
you guys have the largest collection of clean comedy in the world, right?
Right. I'm not like involved in the day-to-day business of VidAngel, but yes, I was an original co-founder. My brothers run that now. But what they've done with Dry Bar is they're releasing content daily, which is a big ask, right? But and it's family friendly stand up comedy, And they're putting these snippets out there on Facebook, and they're now up to 3 million followers when they just launched this thing on Facebook Watch a little earlier this year. And, quite a bit earlier this year, but still 3 million followers, and they're getting somewhere in the neighborhood of like 100 million views now a month. And just astronomical numbers, but you kind of have to go to where your audience is and learn to play on what you kind of have to say to yourself, not only what benefits me, but what benefits the platform that I'm on. Because really, the platforms are self-serving. At the end of the day, Facebook wants to do what's best for Facebook, and YouTube wants to do what's best for YouTube. And they might take a while to get there, but if you're creating content that plays to their game and plays to what is beneficial for them, then yes, that gives you a huge leg up.
Yeah, I love it. What about in general? Just what else do you see for the future of the, media, entertainment, advertising trifecta? What do you see coming down in the next handful of years, next 1 to 3 years, next 5 years?
We might see a lot of resurgence come in the way of branded content. I mean, so much of what you saw in the past of Transformers, like the and G.I. Joe, and some of these early animated shows. Yeah. Well, so much of the content that was made back then was made to sell merchandise. And I think we're going to see a lot more branded content in that way, where original content is being built, but with the sponsorships very much in mind. I think we'll see a lot more of that coming. It'll be interesting to see how much of that comes
like
through.
Like a really long Harmon Brothers ad. That's what you're trying to like a series of Harmon.
Hopefully not. No.
Too funny.
Hopefully it's more of like a regular TV.
I know what you're saying.
TV show, but like
native advertising, branded content.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so there are tens of billions of dollars just waiting to be invested, for example, next year across Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, Facebook, YouTube, and the like, right? And this isn't even including any of Hollywood stuff. These are just the new media players that are coming in, right? And although they are becoming Hollywood, right, in their own way, but they're like tens of billions. And so there's a lot of place for this content coming, and I feel like obviously advertisers are going to have a piece of that pie. And so I think so much of the brand integration and branded content is going to make its way into this different programming, and I think that's a lot of what's coming.
So let's say somebody who's listening is from the size of organization that can play at that level, but they don't know who to talk to. They don't know how to get a foot in their door. They don't know how to figure out what they don't know. If you're their consigliere and you're telling them, go to Hollywood Boulevard and wave $100 bills around. What would you recommend if they wanted to break into that, if they wanted to get ahead of the curve on something like that?
I mean, it's a networking game. At the end of the day, you have to start getting to know creators and influencers to start. It's going to depend more on the type of product or the type of brand that they're trying to promote, because you have to find partnerships that work. You can't just go do it because, everybody's going to be doing this and this is the next thing. You need to be intentional about it. I have a good friend, Ricky Ray Butler. He's the CEO of Branded Entertainment Network, or Ben. And so this is what he does all for a living. Is like, for example, is he goes and he promotes. He finds he finds ways to integrate brands that are his clients into content creators' content and makes all that happen. And it's really good to get to know someone like that, obviously. But yeah, it's just a matter of networking your way in. And obviously, we're not squarely in that field, right? We are right now. We service clients that are looking to do a Harmon Brothers style campaign where we're going to drive a return on investment and we're going to create a long-term brand. And so I'm not even necessarily the best person to ask of like who do you connect with, other than start with anyone that has a following. Like an influencer is anybody that has a following of any kind. Jess, you are an influencer. And then just start networking your way through to creators, And eventually you'll find someone that's like, oh, that's a good match. And it might not be as big as you want to start out with, but at least it gives you a starting point of like, hey, what if we integrated, how could we integrate this into my content? I mean, what you're doing right now isn't all that dissimilar, right? You take a moment for a sponsor break inside your show.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's not necessarily as subtle or something as in a Transformers movie where they hold up a Coke, or I don't know. I don't watch Transformers movies to even know, but it might not be as subtle or even on the nose as that, but essentially it's the same kind of thing. It's integrating the two worlds, right?
Which totally reminds me, we need to take a sponsor break. Okay. Everybody, we'll be right back after the sponsor break. Okay, so Daniel, before the sponsor break, we were talking about a number of different things. I want to shift gears just a little bit, but staying on this element of not just making stuff that's fun or not just making stuff that's creative, but showing up with that intent to be profitable.
Yep.
We obviously live in a world with a lot more venture capital dollars being spread all over the place, and people get hyper concerned about all sorts of numbers that are not profit.
Yes.
And as a result, some make it, some don't.
Yes.
Can you just talk about some of your business philosophy in general? If you had to give advice to somebody else out there growing a brand, what's the Daniel Harmon advice?
Sales fixes all ills.
Tell me about that.
So when you're starting a business, you can make all sorts of mistakes, but at the end of the day, if you have revenue and if you have profits of some kind, if you're actually moving product and making sales, then you can work your way through all those other mistakes. And a lot of people will spend a lot of time building out all these things, like you said, all these quantitative things that might seem like they're important, like, oh, I've got this kind of a social following, or we've got this kind of engagement, or any number of other vanity metrics or things that you can measure off of. But all businesses live and die by sales. And so if you learn how to find that one thing that you can sell, like even if you have this grand vision of something, it's starting with that kind of minimum viable product that will actually create enough value that someone wants to exchange their money with you in order to get that good or service, then it gives you runway to be able to fix the other portions of your business that ultimately all kind of still come back to help the sale as well.
Yeah, I'm just laughing because that sounds like the most simple advice that we would teach in like 5th grade business education class, right?
Yeah.
And yet
that's my level of business education right there.
No,
5th grade.
but I want to talk about this though. It's back to the Leonardo da Vinci simplicity is the ultimate sophistication.
Yes.
We are so proud that we got picked up by the NBC affiliate who sells all our advertising for us and distributes the show for us, and that we got our partnership with Forbes and we're co-hosting our episodes with Forbes now, right?
Congratulations, by the way. That's awesome.
And that's great and all, but that doesn't get to put a kid through college.
Mm-hmm.
Saying you have a partnership with Forbes. Now, obviously the second, third order effects ideally lead to that, right?
Yes.
And so it just makes me think of like, I don't know, can I show up with a beginner's mind? I've obviously crashed and burned like 10 other businesses, had a couple that did well and another 10 that didn't, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So,
like we all have, right?
And so it's easy for me to either choose of like, am I going to be a big deal and be like, oh yeah, I know that? Or am I going to show up with a beginner's mind of like, what kernel of that do I need to learn from right now?
Mm-hmm.
And it is interesting how like every business goes out of business for the same reason. When you can't pay the staff anymore, they stop coming to work.
That's right.
Do you know what I mean? So either you didn't raise enough investment up front to last until you've got revenue,
right?
Or you just didn't get revenue soon enough or enough of it or the whatever, right? And like,
well, sales also creates leverage when you're talking investment. Like if you come to the table to an investor and you can already show sales traction, you have a point of leverage where normally angel investors, venture capitalists, and the like, they are very good at leveraging, right? Because they usually have it, whereas a small business, you don't. But if you have sales and you have a runway and you know you're not going to go out of business next week because, I can still bring in these sales, then you can wait. to get the deal that you want rather than having to give in and do it all on their terms. And so it's huge.
And that's assuming you could do the deal on their terms because, you know that cliche, desperation is a stinky cologne?
Yes, very much so.
Right?
Especially with investors. It's like with investors, it's like high school. It's all about like who's the hot girl, you know, or who's the hot guy. And that's who everyone wants to go out with. And who's cool and like who's in demand. I mean, it's basic economics at the end of the day, but
if you have the revenue and you have the ability to be like, no thanks, it's like the playing hard to get.
Yes,
right?
Very much playing hard to get. Yeah, so I would say that is my best advice for anyone that's growing a business. Is sales cures all other ills, and to us we apply this in advertising. Like I mentioned, I think on the last episode or this one, I can't remember, but we approach from the mindset of sales first, art second. And people get very wrapped up, like you said, on these other things, stylistically cool things when you're dealing with something like film, when you're making video, right? That can be tangential, that can be distracting, that don't ultimately drive home kind of your main value core, your main value proposition for the customer. But if you focus in on what matters, my personal belief is that the art is actually elevated. That you actually get better art by in an advertising sense, especially by focusing on the sale in the way that you should. And what I mean by that is you get more clarity of message. It makes more sense to the customer. I think it resonates better. And at the end of the day, like an artist, what does an artist exist for if they can't like share that art with other people? And you can only share that with other people if you can make it work from a dollars and cents standpoint. That it's got to be able to, you've got to be able to spend $1 and know that you're getting more than $1 back. And so that's for us. That's why that focus is so important.
I love it. I think that's the best place to end. Let's just end right there.
Okay.
Because if more of us could execute on that simple message, we would all have a lot less stress, right?
Yeah, sure. I agree. Yeah.
Well, thanks for making time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Well, that's it for the episode. One other thing I wanted to tell you about, if you'll remember the guys from Convoy in episodes back, Ken Free and Trent Mano, I went on one of their CEO trips to New York, and I met a guy named Brent Thompson, very successful entrepreneur. He was former CEO of Jive Communications, big company now, I think $300 or $400 million. Anyways, he started a new company called blipbillboards.com. I'm super stoked they're a sponsor now. But I remember a year and some ago when I met him, I thought it was genius. Instead of having to buy 6 months or a year's worth of billboard for thousands of dollars, you can buy 8 seconds at a time for like 10 or 20 cents. You pick what billboard you want it on, what time of day you want it to run. And it just puts so much power in the hands of marketers and CEOs who want to try something and see if it works. You can buy as many or as few as you want, change it as many times as you want. I think now our podcast is being advertised on billboards in like 18 different states because we have these guys as sponsors. We're pretty excited about it. Hope you check out blipbillboards.com. Thanks.